You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member, and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. After the British suffered defeats at Saratoga in 1777 and Monmouth in 1778, France joined the American Revolutionary War in June 1778, with Spain jumping in by June 1779. With no clear winner in the north, the British revamped their plan to focus on the south, hoping to gain ground by rallying support from the Loyalists to move through North Carolina and Virginia, surrounding the rebels from all directions. They were emulating their prior success, such as when they captured Savannah in December 1778 and, under Sir Henry Clinton, seized Charleston in May 1780. British forces kept pushing, taking over several key towns across the back country. Following a victory at the Battle of Waxhaws in May, Clinton headed back to New York on June 5th, leaving Lord Cornwallis to try and quell the remaining opposition in South Carolina. In South Carolina, Patriot efforts were led by militia commanders like Thomas Sumter, William Davie, and Francis Marion. To support them, Washington dispatched regiments from the Continental Army, including the Maryland Line and the Delaware Line, commanded by Major General Jean, Baron de Kalb. Setting off from New Jersey on April 16th, they reached near Greensboro by July. The hero of Saratoga, Horatio Gates, took charge on July 25th and decided to head straight to Camden, ignoring the advice of his officers, who warned of the harsh and hostile terrain. Since reaching the Deep River, the troops had faced severe food shortages. On August 7th, Gates's forces were reinforced by 2,100 North Carolina militiamen, followed by 700 Virginia militia at Rugeley's Mill. Despite lacking support from Marion and Sumter, and even refusing cavalry help, Gates seemed to focus on fortifying positions north of Camden to push the British out without direct confrontation. Camden, defended by about 1,000 of Lord Rawdon's men, saw Cornwallis bringing reinforcements on August 13th, swelling the British ranks to over 2,200. Gates, commanding an army of 3,052, two-thirds of whom were militia, inexperienced in working together, ordered a night march towards Camden at 10 p.m. on August 15th. Complications arose when the soldiers' evening meal caused digestive issues during the march, leading to a chaotic encounter with Cornwallis's troops, who were also maneuvering at night. The two forces briefly clashed around 2 a.m. before opting to disengage, avoiding a battle in the darkness. Before dawn broke, General Gates had his forces arranged and ready. He positioned Mordecai Gist's 2nd Maryland Brigade, which consisted of 3 regiments, and the Delaware Regiment on his right flank, all under the oversight of Baron de Kalb. Over on his left, he had Caswell leading 1,800 North Carolina militia members. Next to them were Stephen's 700 Virginians, with 120 men from Armand's Legion positioned just behind the Virginians. Gates, along with his staff, stayed back behind the reserve team, which was Smallwood's 1st Maryland Regiment, located approximately 200 yards from the front line. This setup meant there were about 900 Continental soldiers present on the battlefield. Gates also deployed 7 cannons across the line, manned by close to 100 soldiers, and though there were 70 mounted volunteers from South Carolina present, their exact positions were not clearly known. Gates's strategy, which was standard British procedure at the time, unfortunately placed his less experienced troops against the British force's most seasoned regiments, while his strongest forces were matched against the British's less formidable units. On the opposite side, Cornwallis led a force of about 2,239 men, including Loyalist militia and the Volunteers of Ireland, bolstered by the highly skilled Tarleton's Legion, particularly effective in pursuit situations. Cornwallis organized his army into 2 brigades. The right side was led by Lieutenant Colonel James Webster, who faced the largely unseasoned militia with the 23rd Royal Welsh Fusiliers and the 33rd Regiment of Foot. Commanding the left was Lord Rawdon, who was up against the Continental Infantry with the Volunteers of Ireland, Banastre Tarleton's Infantry, and the Loyalist militia. Cornwallis kept 2 battalions of the 71st Regiment and Tarleton's cavalry as reserves and positioned 4 cannons at the British centre. Similar to Gates, Cornwallis placed his more seasoned troops on the right flank and the less experienced ones on the left. Gates and de Kalb told their forces to go on the offensive, just as Cornwallis did with his men, including Webster. The battle saw 800 soldiers from the 33rd Fusiliers, wielding bayonets, charging at 2,500 Virginia and North Carolina militiamen who lacked experience with bayonets. This led to the American left wing crumbling, with the Virginians and North Carolinians quickly retreating. Impressively, the Virginians managed to escape with just 3 wounded, a testament to their speed, while the North Carolinians retreated as far as Hillsborough, North Carolina. Williams described the British attack as so vigorous and loud that it sent the militia into complete terror, leading them to abandon their positions and weapons almost immediately, following the unworthy example set by the Virginians. To convey how dire the situation was, it was even said in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, the governor of Virginia, that no matter how bad you imagine it, the reality was worse. Garrett Watts, from the North Carolina militia, admitted that their defeat was immediate, with no attempts made to regroup or resist, leading him to discard his weapon and flee alongside others, from officers to enlisted men. As the battle progressed, Rawdon's forces faced stiff resistance and were nearly broken by a counterattack from the Continental troops, but Cornwallis rallied his troops, staving off defeat. Notably, one brigade from the North Carolina militia, positioned near the Delaware line, stood its ground, marking a rare moment of resistance from the militia units. When DeKalb tried reinforcing his troops with the 1st Maryland Brigade, they found it impossible to advance due to being outnumbered and outmaneuvered, as recounted by Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Ford. Cornwallis then ordered a cavalry charge, led by Tarleton, which dispersed the Continental line, though Gist managed to lead about 100 Continentals to safety through a swamp. And another group under Anderson, Howard, and Kirkwood retreated systematically. Tarleton described the aftermath as a scene of widespread defeat and destruction. DeKalb, in a valiant effort to rally his men, fell from his horse and succumbed to his severe injuries 2 days later, while in British captivity. After only an hour of combat, the American forces suffered a devastating defeat, with over 2,000 casualties. Tarleton's cavalry continued to chase the fleeing Continentals for 22 miles. Gates, the American commander, found refuge 60 miles away in Charlotte, North Carolina by the end of the day. Cornwallis's officer, Charles Stedman, painted a grim picture of the battlefield, littered with the fallen, wounded, and scattered belongings and equipment of the Americans, highlighting the chaos and terror that had overtaken the retreat. The British suffered 69 deaths, 245 injuries, and 11 people went missing in this conflict. According to Hugh Rankin, among those killed on the American side, there were 162 Continentals, 12 from the South Carolina militia, 3 from the Virginia militia, and 63 from the North Carolina militia. David Ramsey shared that after the battle, 290 wounded American prisoners were taken to Camden, including 206 Continentals, 82 from the North Carolina militia, and 2 from the Virginia militia. From the number of wounded, one can gauge the level of resistance each group offered. The American forces also lost all of their artillery, which included 8 field pieces, over 200 wagons, and most of their baggage. A letter from Cornwallis to Lord George Germain, dated August 21, 1780, revealed that his army captured about 1,000 prisoners on August 18th, many of whom were injured. The documentary history of the Battle of Camden, the 16th of August, 1780, provides specific information about the American officers involved. Out of 48 Continental officers at Camden, 5 were killed, 4 succumbed to their injuries later, 4 were injured but not captured, 11 were both injured and captured, and 24 were captured without injuries. These figures suggest that a good number of the wounded Americans managed to avoid capture. There are a number of reasons experts believe led to Gates' defeat, and here are the key points. Firstly, Gates, drawing on his experience as a former British officer, arranged his troops in a way that was common for the British, placing his most skilled regiments on what is considered the most honourable position, the right flank of his line. This decision led to the less experienced militia, including many Virginians who had never faced battle, being positioned on the left flank directly opposite the British Army's most seasoned regiments. Furthermore, Gates positioned himself too far from the front line to effectively observe the battle's progress or see what the British forces were doing. Tarleton, critiquing Gates's decisions, pointed out 4 significant mistakes. Not securing a more advantageous position on Saunders Creek before the arrival of Cornwallis, opting to move his army at night, how he placed his militia, and adjusting his troop arrangements just before the battle commenced. In terms of broader strategy, Gates also made several miscalculations prior to the battle itself. He aggressively moved his forces into an area with a strong pro-British sentiment, where local residents loyal to the Crown would not supply his troops or bolster his ranks. This deep advance into enemy-friendly territory left his army cut off from supply lines, resulting in a scarcity of food and leading many soldiers to suffer from diarrhea. Moreover, Gates, perhaps overly buoyed by his victory at Saratoga, mistakenly expected Cornwallis to demonstrate the same lack of tactical acumen as Burgoyne, his opponent at Saratoga. This underestimation of Cornwallis, who was in fact a highly skilled strategist, was a grave error in judgment. Gates moved forward to Hillsborough, covering a distance of 180 miles, and arrived there on the 19th of August. The following day, he prepared his report for Congress. He addressed it to Samuel Huntington, the President of the Continental Congress, starting with a solemn tone. "In deepest distress and anxiety of mind, I am obliged to acquaint your Excellency with the total defeat of the troops under my command." In a letter dated August 30th to George Washington, Gates expressed his readiness to step down if his misfortune alone was deemed enough reason for his removal from command, stating, "But if being unfortunate is solely a reason sufficient for removing me from command, I shall most cheerfully submit to the orders of Congress, and resign an office few generals would be anxious to possess." Despite his efforts, Gates lost command of the Southern Army. Nevertheless, Daniel Morgan and Nathaniel Greene came to his defense, criticizing his decision to engage in battle, but not his actions overall. In the end, Major General Greene, who was actually George Washington's first choice, took over the leadership of the Southern Army. Camden battlefield is situated roughly 5.5 miles north of Camden. The Palmetto Conservation Foundation owns around 479 acres of the battlefield's central area, which is being preserved through a collaboration between private and public sectors. The initial 5 acres were in the hands of the Hobkirk chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution before they passed it on to the present stewards. As of the middle of 2023, the American Battlefield Trust and its partners have successfully conserved over 294 acres of this historic site. It earned its status as a National Historic Landmark in 1961 and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1966. The battle was also featured in the 2000 film The Patriot, where characters Ben and Gabriel Martin observe a battle reminiscent of the actual events. A critical line from Ben in the film addresses the tactical mistake of engaging the Redcoats directly, the stupidity of Gates fighting muzzle to muzzle with Redcoats. However, the movie takes creative liberties, especially in the portrayal of the Continental troops' numbers compared to the militia, and inaccurately shows both the Continentals and militia retreating simultaneously. In 2022, the discovery of 13 soldiers in shallow graves marked a poignant chapter in the battlefield's history. 12 of these soldiers fought for the Continental Army, and 1 served with the British. They were honourably reinterred in 2023, receiving full military honours. The ceremony included participation from the Royal Highland Fusiliers, paying tribute to their memory. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.